Welcome to the WOVEX Why We Shouldn't Do Benefits, covering the top 10 pushbacks benefits professionals experience when trying to implement benefits realization methodologies. This WOVEX is kindly delivered by Trevor, founder of WOVEX Limited. The usual disclaimer: we're grateful for Trevor giving us his time and benefit of his experience, but all views are his own. As part of a series of webinars on different benefits realization subjects, this WebEx is hosted by Claire Deller, Chair of the Benefits Realization Specific Interest Group, a part of the project delivery community on Knowledge Hub for the government's health family organisations.
Yeah, no, thank you, Claire. And hi, everyone. Thanks for inviting me to share today. I really appreciate it. And I want to cover a topic which is really close to my heart because over the years there's been a lot of challenges made about why should anybody do benefit realization. And so what I wanted to do today was to take you through some things which hopefully will help you with that. And just a bit of background to who I am. I've spent the last 20 years almost full-time learning, applying and building insights into successful benefit realization. I led Fujitsu in Europe in the area when there was about 80 practitioners. And since the last 7 years, I've had my own UK-based company. We provide the Realizer platform and services. And pleased to say, we're working with NHS Digital, Claire, and other large programs such as the core system for HS2, other government departments, the largest telecoms company in the US, and Ford, and so on. But I'm not really here to talk about that. And just wanted to reiterate something that Claire had on a slide, that I am from the private sector, so these are my own views. I try to be approachable as well outside of the session, so do contact me if you want to. And also at the end of this session, there's something which should be of interest to you, and I'll mention more about that as we go through. So first of all, about benefits. It's what we all want. It's a very powerful force that moves us to improve. With them, there's gain, advantage, happiness even, and without them, there can be waste, unhappiness, and failure. But yet, many of us have the experience of being challenged when we offer to help people and programs deliver greater benefits. So really, why is that? And what I'd like to introduce are some insights into why that might be. And these are the top 10 pushbacks that I've experienced for your delight and consideration. There are likely many more, but it's good to start with a good set. So first of all, let's look at the scope of benefit realization. So just to introduce some areas we tend to engage around. And the first one is around business case capture and management, that whole capture from idea all the way through to delivery and realization. You've got mapping, you've got profiling, capture, share, and so on. You've got what-if scenarios, business case scenarios, tracking, and also reporting. These 6 areas are what we define as benefit realization. Appreciate there's other things going on, governance and so on as well. But we like to try and be clean, and that's the scope that I'll be talking around with context. I won't refer to it again. It's more just as a bit of context. So really, in terms of the area of work and structure, we find it really, I find it really easy for people to get confused. It seems like it's almost a general pastime in the area that whoever you speak to, it's not hard to confuse them. Maybe that's just me, I don't know. But trying to explain what benefit realization is and getting some confused looks back is pretty common. And so it's no wonder that there's a lot of pushbacks, a lot of challenges. So I'm hoping to spread some clarity and enlightenment, and also to get your views as well as we go through. First of all, in terms of messages there, I'm not trying to or aiming to turn you into salespeople. The world doesn't really need any more of them. This is a lot about clear communication and understanding. And that's why the messages are important. And it's also, whenever you're trying or you talk to people about benefit realization, you can get these pushbacks, these challenges, these rejections, but they're not really rejections. There's always some needs or concerns behind them. So, I mean, of course, some people just do reject, but often it's a case of trying to understand that a bit more, of why they're responding in a certain way. And hopefully it's because they do want to use, but they see some needs or concerns that aren't being met. So really, it's important to understand them, to the pushbacks, to be able to respond and articulate a response. Because once you get through that, then it's often a better relationship that you have, because you're actually showing some understanding about what's driving them and what they're after and what they're concerned about. So building that understanding often is almost like a hump to get over at the start, which does mean that once you get over the hump, things become a lot better. So for your consideration, I put together these 10 pushbacks, and just to go through them. The first one is, and these might ring some familiar bells to you, and I'll be asking later on for your feedback on which ones you feel are the most common ones, or the ones you're most aware of. And the first one is we don't have the skills or the capability, and it's almost as if they expect you to be a magician to be able to do benefit realization. And it's not magic. It's really about being able to say to people, well, actually, there's a way of structuring benefit realization to be right for you. And that includes your skills and capability level. But also about, well, what about if we built your capability and helped with that? Or designed it so it was quite low to get started, or take it slow. So again, there's a lot of expectations and assumptions around benefit realization, the skill level needed, and that might have been because of previous experience. Another one as well is, oh, we're in such a rush, we don't have time to do anything else. We're hard pushed to do what we need to. Never mind take on something else. And obviously we all make time choices about priorities. And there might be other things going on that might, if they think, oh, it's going to be hard enough to cope with doing the stuff I know how to do, never mind something else. But it's helping people realize that they can do benefit realization in parallel. They can just focus on what adds the most value. And also, it might be a lack of understanding that they have. And you'll notice what I'm doing while I'm going through these, and the first two, is there are some standard responses to them, these pushbacks, understanding and then responding in a clear way. And that's what I want you to get out of this session today. So I'll be covering those in a very short while. Another one is actually what benefit realization is going to do for me is give me lots of outputs. It's going to give me maps, registers, profiles, whatever. And actually, they might say, we don't need anything else. Thank you very much. What they don't appreciate is that actually it's not about just the outputs. It's about helping people make better decisions, to help people be more informed, more clear. And that often is driving things. But I find that as a very common one as well, especially when people are very much into their outputs and their process. So that's number 3. Number 4 is, whoa, this area is just so complex. It's too complex for me, my team, and I don't even know where to start. Now, with skills, or similar to skills, you can turn the complexity volume knob to very high with benefit realization, or you can turn it down to what's needed and be very low. And a lot of people don't appreciate really that there is this volume knob of complexity, and it's about doing what's right for them. So again, number 4 is a very common one that I get faced with, and why it's important to sort of break it down. I'm sure you won't have come across this one at all, but look, we can't afford to do anything else. We can't afford to pay for anything, any extra activities, and actually some activities we really need that I know about, we can't even do. And again, this is almost a value question around, right, well, do you actually understand what benefit realization is and is about? And part of it is about helping you be more efficient, to deliver more for less. So actually understand. Now let's go through what it is and the components of cost and design something which actually will meet what you have, your constraints. So I'm not going to dwell on that one too much because I'm sure you're very familiar with the pushbacks on affordability. Really, number 6 is around you don't have the data. It's almost like, well, we don't have the inputs. You need to, surely benefit realization is about doing some activities, creating some outputs. Surely we need some inputs for that. And it's true, you do need inputs. Often it's not hard data, and often it's not very precise data that's needed straight away. So for example, a lot of people I deal with, they love mapping because it gives insight, helps conversations. That's nothing to do with the data. It's about getting things together, getting things clear and having those discussions going. And as one thing was explained to me is that in Formula One, when there's a crash in Formula One, I've been told, the advice to drivers who got that in front of them is to head straight for it. To actually head for where the crash has occurred. Obviously, as long as it's not off the track. Because the idea is that once you get there, it won't be a problem anymore. It'll actually have cleared. And if you try and overthink it or prejudge, then often you're going to get yourself into more trouble. So often it's a case of, let's just park the data, the input information you feel you need. There are ways around data when you don't have it, but let's just carry on and let's deal with it. And some people also think that benefit realization is an industry around data collection, and it's obviously not. So for example, on HS2, the initial benefit profiles were developed over a 6-month period, and that involved quite a bit of engagement. But I won't dwell on this one too much. That's number 6. Now, number 7, I really relate to because it comes down to a lot of people going, look, I don't understand what benefit realization is. I don't understand what it can do for me, and therefore, why should I bother? And actually, if it was of any value, I would have heard about it by now, surely. So this comes down to a lot of asking really people, look, do you not want more value? And going through the standard benefits or areas of value that benefit realization brings. So there are 8 common benefits for benefit realization and that we use. And I'll share some of those at the end. I mentioned there was something. So I've got a link and to some information. And one of the first things I do is take people through what it actually is and what it tends to do for people. And that helps them understand why it could add value for them. Another classic one is, I've got to be very careful with my words here, but let's just say some people don't like transparency. They will act to ensure that things aren't transparent, not because of dodgy things, but because it's quite exposing. And there's some expectations from people that actually they want things under their control, and benefit realization is just going to open the doors to everybody knowing everything about the performance of the program, for example. So again, that's not true. You don't have to share to be open. You just need to look and focus on benefit realization, planning, and delivery. And really, this one is around process, of course. That a lot of people are very comfortable with how they work. They're very comfortable with the roles they carry out, the deliverables, and some people find it very hard to change and take things on. I know Claire and the team have been doing a great job educating people in what it is. It's also around understanding that it doesn't mean a massive change to core process. It's addition, it's tweaking, it really needs to be tailored for how you work. So just to come on to the last one, I think it's the last one. I'm not very good at counting, so I've not been using my fingers. But really, we've done it before and it didn't work. So why should it work now? And this one is really, well, surely we learn. There's more things around now to help and support. And it's about being realistic, that often things aren't right and don't come out as planned. So what I've gone through is really 10 pushbacks that I have experienced. So we'll just give it a few minutes to give you the opportunity. What I've been doing is going through some responses for people who push back because of skills, capability, and time as well. What I want to cover now is the second half, is really to go through quite quickly some of the responses that you can give. We've got more information that we use. There's a whole matrix of, if they push back in this way, these are the best ones to use, and so on. And I'll talk a bit more about that at the end. There's 14 of these, so to cover the first 7 on this slide, one of them is to actually help people to understand the true value of benefit realization. Excuse me. So it's really understanding, I mentioned around those 8 common benefits. You know, are they valid here? Do they have any relevance? If you don't believe it's going to add any value to you, for example, then what about these? If not, then fine, but at least it's good to talk people through them. And there's a link at the end where you can go and see those. Also, sometimes people just want some proof. They're pushing back because they might say they don't have the skills or the time, because they don't really understand the detail of how it would work, how it might work alongside the current processes. And sometimes that's a case of scaling back some parts of it to actually reduce what's needed, because there might be some things that you don't need. So, for example, you might not need to do some sort of scenarios in detail, or you might not need to do mapping, or just a light touch. So again, helping to people understand the proof of what can happen and help them choose, to take some things out, or just to turn down the volume, as I mentioned before, on some things. And also you can, if you've got a process where you're doing some analysis and then first to type and so on. You can say, actually, what we'll do is we'll bring things in or delay certain things to split them up, which I know is the approach that Claire and team use. But you can really help people understand it's not one big block of stuff that you need to do. Also, it might be that you need to just focus in on maybe the top 3 things when you're in conversation with people. So it could be about, look, this is the skills needed. These are the time that you need. And let's focus in on trying to reduce that down together with the important things that are good for you. Likewise, sometimes people get quite excited about certain areas and they want them to be strong. They want an exemplar. They want an exemplar map that can be reused, or a business case because it's really important for everyone that that is strong. And the last one on there, number 7, is sometimes it's about sitting down with people and explaining what benefit realization is, what should they do, what could they do, what should we not do, and is out of scope. So it's part of an education process which will help them and also help you understand, as I mentioned before. This isn't about selling, this is about understanding and getting those insights so you've got a stronger relationship. Because the last thing you want to do is go into somewhere and actually not be wanted. The final 7, so number 8, is really this listening, this understanding, questioning. Now, I mentioned on the early slide around there's some needs or concerns there to actually understand what they might be. There could also be some issues or blockers in the way. So it could be a skills thing, or there could be something hanging around. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the angry chimp type of approach. Sometimes people, they have this focus and anger or intensity about a different subject or area which can be blocking them making any other decisions. So sometimes it's about understanding what those are and giving people the time to clear them before engaging with them on this and keeping in contact. So I put in skills, knowledge and abilities because sometimes they're issues. That it might be a case of saying, look, let's do some training, let's help you, and let's share some things. Because if that's an issue for you blocking, then let's clear that away. Also about urgency. Sometimes people might want to have a bit like the focus and the magnification of an area. Sometimes it's good to say what we need therefore to do to make this successful is some urgency. So you say you don't have the skills, let's put people through a really intense thing and say this is really urgent, we get this out of the way. And likewise, you can also turn that the other way and slow things down. And especially when there's a skills area or some complexity, then taking it slowly can actually help people to digest, make sense, and be comfortable with things. So again, just some responses to consider and go through. Also, just covering the last 3, as well as slowing things down, sometimes you can speed things up. And it's not just about the urgency of saying, look, come on everyone, this is really important. Sometimes it's about saying, right, actually we need to just do a quick pass. You know, the saying of a perfect answer is often too late. And sometimes it's good to go through things quite quickly, get something there that actually people go, oh, now I see it, I feel more comfortable. So sometimes it's just about getting something done. Being unique, that's there to say maybe you have a requirement that is unique to you, and we do need to develop a new thing that we do to meet that requirement because it is associated with the area. And often we find that, for example, I can't talk too much about it, but Ford in the States, they've been doing some really significant things to transform themselves, very benefits-led. And there's some things which they're pushing the boundaries. And so their view of benefit realization is slightly different. Totally okay. So really, people don't have to fit into a standard box of what this is. And the last one on their compatibility. Sometimes language, sometimes process, sometimes structure and format needs to change so people don't feel like this is a big change for them. So it could be around sharing information with systems or with guidance that's produced or briefings. So you can go back to people who say, look, we can't do this, we can't take it on. So actually, let's make it more digestible. Let's put a sugar coating around the pill to help people digest it better. So quite a few and quite a lot of stuff to take in there in terms of the 14 areas. And what I've put together for you is almost like a quick reference guide to say, look, on the left here, you've got some common pushbacks. And on the right here, there's some ways to respond. And this can be, for example, okay, we don't have, or there's no added value. So why don't we do some explaining? Let's show some proof. Let's understand a bit more about what you mean, and maybe share the 8 areas of benefit. If it's too complex, maybe we reduce some things, take some, sort of turn down the volume, split them out, maybe take it a bit slower, and maybe there's some issues around training or other things. So hopefully that slide will be of value to you. And what I'd like to do is share this link with you. I've got one more exercise to do. But on that link, wovex.com/health, what we're launching is, let me go to here, is a service, a free service, where you can basically put in on some questions on here. So this questionnaire is the one of interest. Let me just go to the full screen version. So the first question here is those 8 categories. So these are the things that we've found that people get the most value or benefit from benefit realization. They want control of the negatives, the disbenefits. They want confident decisions and so on. So I won't go through all these. The idea on here is that you can see them, rate them. You can have a look at the scope and also capture the pushbacks, can't afford and so on. I wanted to help everybody. So we've got some standard templates where we take the responses and say to you, right, let's give you something back where there's the priorities of the benefits, the recommended scope, and given the challenges, maybe these are things you should try, plus some extra things as well. The main thing for there is really the 8 areas. It also helps if you're having a conversation on the new program to have a go, fill it in, and we'll help you to put something together. Back over to you and Menti. So if you do have any thoughts or comments or questions, then you can put them on there.
We've had a couple from Martin. He asks first of all, he comments that our big pushback is that I can see benefit to my organisation, but there's no benefit to me. So why should I be involved?
Yeah, and that's almost it's a really good one, because it's just play to the the what's in it for me, and getting that you're almost getting down to specific benefits. So what we do a lot of is understand how people are measured, what concerns they have and needs, and then try and focus it in. So there's almost, I don't want to get too technical, but on the maps, we tend to have what does the organisation want, what does the area want out of this, and then have an area which is actually what do the individual stakeholders want out of this. So it's important that the outcomes from the individual stakeholders are captured. And it might not be shared with everyone, but sometimes we do have, with key stakeholders, sort of personal benefit maps to say, look, you're involved in 3 programs or 1. This is what you're trying to get out of it. And look, this is how it aligns to give you what you need. But yeah, just some general experience tackling it, so that's good. Hopefully that's helpful. Fantastic question on the board there. I think that's partly the role of the profiles area that I mentioned, to actually go through it and say, right, well, what is it you're measuring? What is your confidence level in the data you're collecting? What are the assumptions and the risks around it? So you take it away almost from saying, look, you're giving a number, or there's going to be something happening on a measure. This is going to be really impacting for you. It's really important to actually put it into context of saying there are assumptions about the data, there's assumptions made around the targets, around the reliability of the data. So let's not use it as a evidence in court. What you're trying to do is you're trying to increase everybody's understanding. A lot of this is about clarity. And what we're doing is just trying to be clearer as we go forward. And I often liken it to plans, where you don't put a project plan in place and then sack people because an activity is not taking place exactly on the right day. It's about being tolerant, understanding the purpose of the measures, and yeah, hopefully that helps. How do you deal with people who only want to measure cash? Fantastic. I went into a bank in the city, and I got told in the side room, whatever you do, don't mention benefits. It's all about money. And so what we tend to do is really go through and say, great, yeah, that's obviously important, cash. Now let's look at the things that contribute to cash. And I often talk about the balanced scorecard, about actually what you want is process changes. You might want capability change, which all contribute to cash. So what we're doing is we're unpicking it a bit more to understand what the cause and effect things you're relying on to deliver cash. So yes, let's measure it, but surely you want to also understand if you're going to miss it, your cash targets, your expectations, or there's some things you can do, early warning, to actually do that. So that's why you need to measure more, because cash doesn't just drop from the sky. There's certain shifts in process, in capability, in people, in patient behavior, etc. So often balanced scorecard is a great one to go through that. Okay, so another one. When internal audit has identified the need for benefits management, how to justify the scope of doing properly, because seniors push a quick win. Yeah, I had something in Australia recently with this, that the guy said, look, surely we can get this stuff done, in half a day. We just need to meet and push it through. Often with this, it's a case I've found talking to people about the softer side of the decision making, that you're clarifying things, you're helping to get people of a single mindset because they'll come up with better ideas, they'll stop doing things which don't add value and so on. Now the time for people to make sense of things and the importance of a lot of the decisions lends itself to doing things like maps to visually show and engage people, get people on side, profiles to define things so there's no mistakes made, scenarios because you want to do some what-if analysis, tracking because you do need to know what's going on, you need to sense. So I'd say in certain cases you can do it quick if it's just like a map or a profile, but often there's a range and sometimes it's not a quick win, especially if you want to build capability as well. How do you get senior managers and the board to let you do benefits and take it seriously? Well, one thing that occurred to me a long time ago was companies and organizations don't set out to waste value, to throw value out the window. They want to deliver value, get the most of what they've got. And in terms of benefit realization or benefits management is a way to do that. The 8 areas are all around stakeholder risk, around other areas. So what I do is take the board through these 8 areas, help them understand there's volume switches or controls, there's different levels of complexity, there's tailoring, and just say, look, let's do a pilot, let's do 1 or 2 areas, and let's see the proof. So it's almost, there's got to be an education process alongside it. So it's not a magic wand. I mentioned that you don't have to be a magician. You just need a change process behind it. So often it's just what I've been through. It's about understanding what their concerns are and pushbacks, responding to them, and getting them on side. Right. I think given the number of competing priorities out there, another pushback is that others see benefit realization as not being a priority. Exactly. And some conversations you're not going to win because they just go, look, I've got 10 things I should do or need or must do. I can only do 5 of those, so there's no room in the inn. And that's fine. Often it's a case of saying, look, sometimes if you understand what it is, what it can do, flexibility we have, being able to apply it for you, and what it gives you, and personal wins as well as for the program, if you still want it, then we're not trying to sell and force something on you. So I think it's that process of education and going through engagement with people. And then if they make that decision, then fine. But at least you know that they're more aware for the next time, even if things change, what it is you actually mean by it. Right. So what's the role of a benefits owner, and do we need them? That's a good one. I think we've got about 8 or 10 roles for a benefit measure, and similar for a benefit, an outcome. A lot of the reason for having the owners there is to actually say to people, look, we don't want this to be lost. We want somebody to make sure it's in their, it's one of their sheep to tend. And what we do is we need to make some decisions, whether we monitor, measure, forecast that benefit and the measures associated. So we need somebody to go to, almost like a subject matter expert on that area. And they might have budget accountability for finance, or they could be chosen for many other reasons. Because I like to treat benefits like sheep, but I won't go there. So yeah, it's really that it needs to live somewhere and sit somewhere. So you definitely need them. It's likely to not happen straight away. Once you get clarity and do your profiling and unpick them, then they're more likely to sort of become obvious who should take it into their flock. Also, what should owners actually do? Well, it is that tending, it is that clarity. So across the phases, it's from making sure it's defined and there's clarity and certainty and the right level of sign-off and buy-in, but also that the changes, the cause and effects assumed from making a change or putting a solution in, is actually going to make a difference. So, where it is now, is there things in the plan to make it happen? So they're championing, looking after their sheep to make. Yeah, I'll shut up now because I'll go too far with that one. Business case is predicated on realizing benefits, but our challenge is involving the right people and how to get people to take ownership. And I think it's almost linked to that previous question on how do you get people involved and to sign up. It's that what's in it for me. So often by going through and speaking with someone who you want to take ownership, understanding their concerns, what they need, and doing this focus bit of saying, look, okay, there might be 2 or 3 things, or even one, that will help you be more successful and feel good. And what is that? So often it's that, unfortunately, I don't believe in the stick side, but if it is in part their objective, fine. But often you need more than that. You need to have people understand why this is important for the company, the organisation, the area, and for them. And that's the only way. Sometimes we sort of recommend putting outcomes, benefits, and measures in just for them, so they can actually be focused and come to the table. It might have very little impact on the main program benefits, but what it does do, it creates that hook and that pull to get them involved. And while they're there, they help with other things. Right, another one. Sometimes doing the benefits makes those other priorities easier to meet. For example, benefits map speeds up planning. Exactly, a great point. Because a lot of what you're doing, there's a case I had recently where you can cut big chunks out of the program because you realize there's no benefit in doing it. So what, I talk about an aggregator, agitator. So doing benefits, you're aggregating, you're pulling things and people together that go into planning, but you're agitating because you're challenging to try and cut things down and help people focus on the right things. So good point. Tracking of benefits for programs tends to scale down after the outcome. Well, that's a personal choice. Sometimes it's right to do that, and sometimes everybody shifts to another area. So I'd say that's important in the profile to define, should it scale down? Because that will, if it shouldn't, after the program has been completed or the outcome's been achieved, then there needs to be budget or change put in, and that needs to be part of the case, that after program cost and change. Right. Benefit realization is a control put in place to mitigate one of the major risks of projects not delivering. Do you agree? I'd say I don't agree that it's to mitigate one of them, because if you look at the 8 areas, you've got things in there, for example, like stakeholders not being engaged, and maybe for certain ones, programs that could be the most significant. Sometimes it's about cost and so on. So I'd say benefit realization is a control put into place to mitigate potentially many major risks of projects. And often I've seen it justify the cost as part of the risk mitigation or risk activities, to actually say we need to do this because otherwise, if this risk happens or these risks, it's going to cost us a lot more. I think this might have to be my last one. I'm conscious of time, but okay, this is going to be flowery. Choosing the right owner whose bum gets kicked, I assume, over this. e.g. who is held to account for A&E performance to make them the owner of A&E bends. As mentioned at the start, I'm not from the domain, but in terms of if you're looking at an overall business or a function, then you tend to have a basket or a balanced scorecard full of measures which about performance. So understanding the owner of those objectives for that area and how some change can impact them, I think is a really important thing, because you shouldn't look at this really, or it doesn't help sometimes to look at it as just a program. What you're doing is actually looking at the future capability and how they work. So you want to plug into who's already held to account. If it's nobody, then you can flag that up.
Before we move on, just one thing. Ratiel had a great comment / question. I don't know if Ratiel, you want to unmute and ask it, because it was a bit too long to put in Menti.
Yeah, that's fine. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes, you're fine.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, the pushbacks around complexity, not having time and not having the right skills or capacity, I mean, these are all genuine concerns, but it may just be, a natural, outcome of the discipline, because effective benefits realization involves a reasonable amount of methodology, which involves some degree of technical understanding and application, and anything technical or methodology sort of related will unfortunately always involve some degree of complexity or skill, which may turn some people off.
That's a good point. I'd sort of push back myself on that, because for some people we speak to, benefit realization is tracking. That's all it is. And for some people, it's just mapping. So if you're doing end-to-end embedded benefit realization in complex programs, then you need a professional who knows what they're doing. Otherwise, there will be that grit in the oyster. They won't last long. So I agree with you on the sorts of programs I assume you're involved in. Then you do need that level, because you need not only to understand the process, but have the skill to apply it and when to step back, and so on. What is the scope? What is the level of complexity, volume, and so on? So again, talking to people about what they expect, and maybe for some, you just use it at the start and say, just give it a chance. Let's start with this. Let's show you some maps. Let's get you going, do some education. And if you don't want to do it, carry on, then fine. But give us a chance really and do some education. A good point.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Well, it's nearly past, Trevor, so I guess we'd better hand over to you to wrap up.
Yeah, no thanks, Claire. Yeah, thanks again for inviting me and for everyone taking part. As mentioned, do contact me and do have a go at the questionnaire. Yeah, I've really enjoyed the questions and the engagement, and no, it's been great fun. Thank you all. And have a brilliant day.
Thank you, Trevor. That's been absolutely fascinating. I don't know about everybody else, but I got a lot out of that, and I think I'm going to be watching this back over and over, picking out different things each time. And we have one last question on the chat. Hi, Trevor. What would you define as a professional that can deliver a complex program?
I'm assuming for benefit realization. Well, I'm a strong believer in the T-shaped consultant, where you've got a capital T and across the top the T. You've got some generic skills, and so there's a number of generic skills I think you need, like facilitation, analysis, and so on. And then the bit of the T going down is the specialist skills. So you've got things like mapping, like profiling, like scenarios, and so on. So I think the size and shape of that T, the generic and the specific benefit realization, is something which is quite, well, can be quite clear. It's almost there's different levels of professional and growth, but I would say you need the top level areas as well as the bottom bit, and it's about growing that. So we were always pushed, and I always say to people, look, you need to be specialist in one area first, like mapping or profiling, and then grow those out over time. So yeah, I mean, I won't get into the professional part of it, but as somebody competent, I think looking at that T and growing it out is a really good start for individuals as well as organisations looking to grow a capability as well, what sort of Ts they need, sort of shapes.
Thank you, Trevor, and thank you everyone for all your questions.
Yeah.